This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Living It Out podcast, a weekly podcast to help remind you that you matter and help you live out that truth throughout the week. My name is Casey Greenewalt, and I am honored to be here today as your host. I have two guests today, which is so fun. I have Marna and Ben with me, our Next Steps team centrally. So thank you guys so much for joining us and hanging out with us today. I'm excited that you are here. We are in the second week, or just wrapped up the second week of this series called The Blessing. And so we're talking about what it looks like to live a blessed life, to be blessed. And I think we talked last week a little bit how that word sometimes maybe has some connotations in your brain and maybe leads you to a certain type of thought or what it means. I do good, I get good, maybe karma comes to mind. We talked through all that last week. And I would also encourage you, if you haven't listened to this week's message or last week's message, go back and listen to it. Ben does a great job of setting up a lot of our conversation and what we're going to be talking about today. I want to talk a little bit about something that is first, because this is the first part of our conversation, and Ben talked all this weekend about first. So a question for you guys is, do you make your bed? Is it the first thing you do in the morning? I feel like I have an idea of how you're going to answer this, but go ahead.
I can't wait to hear Ben's response. It has to be yes. It has to be yes.
So, yeah, we do. Yeah, we make our bed pretty much first thing in the morning. Now, I will say, before I was married, no, that was not my go-to. But now that I have a wife and she's a bed maker, I have become a bed maker for sure. But it used to be like first thing. But now that we have kids, we get them up for school. We just got the dog, all that stuff. Normally it's like we'll get up around 6:15, get out the door by 7:30. I come home, by 8 o'clock, and then it's like whoever gets upstairs next or first makes the bed. So not first thing, but it's before we start our day.
I'm not sure why this question feels like a virtue to me, almost like there's a right answer here, right? Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we do. We are not consistent on this one.
Really?
I know,
Okay.
Casey.
That makes me feel so much better about myself. So I'm really glad that you answered that way. Now, first of all, I want to comment on a couple things. You called him a bed maker, which is funny because I like call him a bed wetter, which is like what you call like a middle school boy.
Right.
Bed maker. That's great. I love that. So Ben, you guys are bed makers, and Marna, you're inconsistent in this.
Sometimes.
Well, were you guys, when you first got married? I'm curious. Like, was it a value when you first got married? Did you make your bed like growing up? Because this whole podcast is not about making your bed, by the way. I just want to read it.
The virtue of making
I
your
wasn't.
bed.
I was not. That came when I got married. Then I adopted that from her.
Gotcha. See, I always told my mom that making my bed didn't make sense because I'm just going to get back in it that night and make it messy again, which in my head at the time, made sense. But as I've gotten older, I actually do appreciate a nicely made bed. The blankets nice and tucked underneath. I'm learning as I get older, I'm more of a perfectionist and maybe a little bit borderline OCD than I maybe had ever known about myself. But we got a puppy, and I now it's a lot harder, Ben. So I feel that you have kids. Obviously, it's a dog, so it's a little different. But it's like way hard, man. I'm like, can someone make the bed? She's like, I want the dog out, and I'm like, I'm doing dishes. So the more adult you become, the harder it becomes to do adult things. That's how I feel.
Oh, okay.
Write that down somewhere.
I will.
That's amazing. I love it. Well, I don't know if you make your bed or not. If you don't, I would encourage you to, because it actually is a great way to start your day. Because this weekend, Ben actually mentioned a little bit about how the first thing that we do, first thing you do in the morning. He mentioned a couple different stats that he rattled off, maybe chugging a glass of water, or making your bed, or working out. Those first things we do with our first moments of our day are impactful. They make a difference. Science shows that. Research shows that. And so as we step into this conversation today, I think it's really, really important for us to just take a step back and look at our life and just be honest with ourselves. Well, what do we actually put first? I think that was a lot of what Ben talked about this weekend, because his bottom line was this: we experience God's best when we give him our first. And in order to give him our first, we have to be honest with ourselves about where we are and where we aren't giving him our first. And so I'd love for the two of you guys to unpack a little bit of that bottom line. and maybe even talk a little bit about, your own life, maybe some seasons when you put God first, how you saw that come into fruition. You saw maybe blessings come from that. But again, I'd love to hear from you guys. Talk a little bit about that bottom line.
So I think the first thing that was really important out of this is this idea that God cannot be second. I mean, we may choose to put him somewhere other than first, but theologically, that was that preeminence. Like, God is first. And so, which is sort of that mind bend of like, okay, now wait a minute. If I don't put him first, then how is he still first? Well, because he's God and we're not. Like, that's sort of the, so I thought that was a really important, like, foundational piece. And I love how you asked that, Casey, were there seasons where you have or haven't? Like, I feel like this has been very much a part of growing in faith, and so much of this talk is about our faith and how does it demonstrate itself in what we put first and how and when and why and some of those pieces. So I would say that early on, no, there was all sorts of places God wasn't first for me. And now, looking back on that time, which I would say I've really been fully following Christ for about 10 years now, that slowly over time has been one of the places I think that he's challenged me over and over. So I love that question because it's not like an automatic, but I certainly had to become aware of those places and be really intentional about putting him there. So that morning, like reading the Bible in the morning for me was not a part of my daily, like that wasn't part of the deal. Now it is. So that would be one practical example. So how about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think I listened to another pastor give a talk about kind of order, and I think we probably all have been in a meeting or a conference or seen the illustration where the person takes a big like glass jar, and he like has these pebbles in them, and then he tries to put the big rocks in and they don't fit, and then he starts with the big rocks, and then he's able to put all the pebbles in, right? And it's like just like the order, like you have to have those big rocks in life, one, figured out, but then two, make sure those are the most important things that you're putting first. So I think that for me in my seasons of life, when I think about like when I remember like, hey, what's most important, who's most important, when I remember, okay, what's my mission, what are my values, and I put those things first, then I feel like, hey, I'm doing well, I'm living, a blessed life or
Mm,
experiencing that. But when I let all the little things kind of drive my day, like then I become stressed, I become worried, I become like I didn't get anything done today, I feel like I didn't accomplish anything. So to me, when he was talking about like the order you do things really matters, I thought that really stood out
yeah.
for me with that principle of first, of like, okay, what
Mm,
are those things that are most important? And obviously, the preeminence of God, like he's number one, he should be first.
mm.
So I thought those were some standout things for me with his talk.
Yeah, I think that piece of theology is important. I'm glad you mentioned it, Marna, because it's not, yeah, it's difficult to understand, but it's like you can put whatever you want to be first, but the reality is God is still present and working and doing things, and so He is first. So I think it's just what you said, though, that awareness of that allows us to step into the plan that He has for us. And it doesn't mean there's going to be extreme clarity in every step of the way. It doesn't mean we're always going to get it right, but it does mean that it's a journey. And if we put him first, I think, as we make big decisions, as we start our days, as we look at our finances, as we look at our relationships, all of those different dimensions of our life. You guys, both of you said it, you'll see blessings come. And it's not because, again, it's not karma. It's not do good things so good things happen. It's the path. And I think that's one of the reasons I love faith. And we'll kind of continue here in a second, is that it's kind of evident as you do it. Like you step into it and you're like, okay, I'm going to forgive people before I'm forgiven, or I'm going to seek to understand before being understood, right? That's just a fancy way of saying a lot of things that Jesus said and a lot of the principles in the Bible. But if I live that out, if I do that, what I'm going to see is my relationships deepen. when my relationships have more depth to them, they're going to be richer. I'm going to experience more blessing from them. So I say all that because it's intuitive in some ways. And so that's why God is always first, is because you can't get around the blessings that will come when you walk in the path that he set before you. So I think it's just important for us to hear that, because a lot of, I think, and again, this goes back to what we talked about last week, but the maybe the connotation in our brains of what blessing means is I do something and so I get more. And I really just want to like crush that belief, because it's just not the point. It's not the purpose. And so I think it's important to clarify that. Go ahead, Marna.
Yeah, Casey, I love that, because it pushes so much into that. And like you said, we talked about this last week, but it's almost like you can't have that conversation without going back to, okay, what does that actually mean? And that Jeremiah 17:7, but blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. That's what we're saying. That is the blessed life.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, there's depth in relationships, and there's so much joy or fulfillment or purpose in our everyday in some of those things. But it's because we've put our trust in the Lord, and He's our hope and confidence. So this is so much of what Ben pushed into is God first. Because well, you could fill that in, like, who do you trust, and where is my hope and confidence, which again is sort of how that foundation talk started last week. But man, it really does. It's like every time you talk about it, I'm like, okay, so that means it's going to be good, right? Like the bless, I'm going to get good. Like I'm going to
Right.
define it as good.
Yeah.
And that's not
Yeah.
always the case. Yeah.
It's almost like richness doesn't always equal good, right? Like the richness of it all that you experience doesn't always mean it's going to be an easy path. So I would encourage you listening right now, just stop, press pause, take a second, maybe talk to the people that are around you, if you're in the car listening, wherever it may be. Just reflect. You know, what is first for you in your relationships, your time, your calendar? Like what are the other things, you know, if you were to take the commandment of don't put any other gods before me, right? What other gods, if you will, have you placed first? And again, not necessarily God, maybe something in your life that you are placing first in your life. Think about that, and maybe write it down. Just to be aware of it is a great next step as we look to put God first in our life. Well, Ben talked a little bit about the practicality of this. So yes, like let's examine, reflect, be introspective, all of those things. But there is like some practical things that we can do to take some next steps here. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about some of the things that Ben talked about, some of the suggestions he gave, and maybe for our listeners, hopefully have some ideas that they can take home today.
Yeah, I think the first practical thing he talked about was really, making God the first part of your day. Um, and I think that can be difficult. I mean, depending on the season of life you're in, depending on a bunch of things. Our writer in the Living It Out Tuesdays post, she wrote about her morning schedule. She's got 5 kids, like all under 10 maybe. I can't remember the oldest one, but they're all younger. And, her day starts with usually one of them needing something. And it's like, man, to be able to start my day first, even if it's just opening my eyes and like just realizing, hey, today's the day that God made, and I'm, gonna offer it to Him and just kind of seek His will in these few quiet moments before the kids get up. I think that can be difficult, but that's definitely a way we can start a day. He used Mark 1:35. He talked about how Jesus did this. He said Jesus, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. So I think that was one of the practical things that we can do, is just kind of starting our day off before we grab the phone, before we, turn on whatever it might be, whatever device we get our news from, or, interact with other people in our house, just to be able to connect with God.
Yeah, I think for me, the other thing that he talked about was just honoring God with your first fruit, which is really like that's sort of Old Testament speak, but it's sort of like whatever we first receive, of giving the very best and the first of it back to God. I love how Ben talked about this being really a returning to Him. we call, when we think about giving, a lot of times, this is where he talked about, like, do we have to tell our kids, like, this is how you say mine, and this is how you don't share? Like, no, we're all real hardwired to say mine and not share.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if we can have, like, it all goes back to, if God is first, and he's actually given us all of this, then that faith piece moves us to give the very best of that first in return to him. So it's acknowledging who he is in our life, and then really returning it.
Mm,
So Ben hit on this a little bit, with what is called a tithe, which is that first 10%. It's sort of the easiest, I think, sometimes when you think about it from finances, because it's like, here's the percentage. And it's like, God first gave us all of that. And so returning to him that 10% and
mm,
recognizing that he went through some of those Old Testament places. So think Old Testament, very agricultural, society. Like Walmart's not on the corner, so you got to go get your food and dinner. And so they would have, been, really directed to give the very best of their first crops, of their first animals. And there was a lot of spiritual significance to that, but the bottom line is the biggest spiritual significance is where God was in their life,
mhm,
and where their heart was on it. So he
mm,
unpacked a lot of those pieces of clean and unclean and some of those pieces, but the really all of it drove towards, we're going to recognize that all of this came from God first,
mm,
and not give him the leftovers, but to offer him the very best of that first back. And that's the faith piece. Like, there just went the most beautiful lamb that we've ever had, that would have been a really good dinner on the table, but we're gonna trust. So that's back to that, here's the blessed life. It's where we put our trust and our hope and our confidence. We're going to trust that that's going to come from somewhere else, that we don't need that. We need God more than we needed that. So
mm,
I thought all of that, it was a bit of a crash course on the Old Testament, and some of the things that started all the way from, Cain and Abel through Exodus and Leviticus. But, I hope that even just through this, it's like, man, that all of that's pointing back to that God wants the very best first, because he's given us all of it.
mm, mm.
He's given us all of it.
Yeah. Again, we experience God's best when we give him our first. And Ben did this weekend. He unpacked a lot of the Old Testament, this transactional relationship that so many people had with what they thought to be God for so long, and then this God shows up that's different, right? It's a whole different way of doing things, and he's going to bless them and give them things and to do so many things for them. But at the same time, he's saying, I need your perspective to stay holy, to stay pure, and to do that, give me your best first. It's like,
Hmm.
um, I think all of that is super important to understand, and I'm grateful that Ben unpacked a lot of that this weekend. But the principle still stays the same. So thank you
Hmm.
guys both for unpacking that. I don't know what that looks like for you. I told you this week, a great thing to do is just kind of evaluate, maybe look back on the past year. We're still in the first month of the year. It's a first of the month, right? We have like this ingrained first every 12 months. So you've got an opportunity right now to look back and go, okay, how do I put God first in the beginning of 2021? This week, your day, whatever it may be. I think my dog just pawed at the door right there. That was great. Easily distracted right here. Either way, point being, what is your first? Maybe it's in the morning. Maybe it's before you go to bed. But like, what does it look like for you to give your best to God with your time, with your resources, your finances, all those things? It's super important to do. And talk to people about it. If you're not in a group, this is a great time to join one and to dive into some conversation around what that looks like for you, because groups are the most important thing. Quick story real quick. It's actually really cool. This past weekend, I got to marry a friend of mine. So I went through all the pastoral stuff, so I can marry people now. It's really cool. And I got to marry my friend Caleb Martin and his fiance Jill. And Caleb actually showed up to my hoop group, my basketball group, about a year and a half ago for the first time. And we developed this really cool friendship. And it was cool. Some of the guys that were at the wedding, in his wedding, he met at hoop group. So I'm not saying you're going to like meet your best man at a group, but I'm just saying groups are an incredible place for you to meet people, to engage in real conversation, and to just develop some relationships that are going to help you find freedom from whatever it is that you're going through in your life. And so you can find all of our groups at cedarcreek.tv/groups. You can text the word groups to 419-419-0707. That'll send you a link The registry is opened this past weekend, and we are looking forward to getting this group semester launched. It'll be a lot of fun. Marna, Ben, any other thoughts or notes on this group semester? I know you guys are excited for it to start as well, but I want to give you a chance if you have anything to say about that.
No, I'm with you, Casey. It's really fun to hear those stories. And if that wasn't your experience, it's okay. Try it again. Try a different group. It's not always the right one the first time. And sometimes it just really clicks and it's like, man, this is amazing. And other times it just doesn't. And that's not necessarily anything that, that we would want to have happen, obviously. But I really hope that that you just try again. I just think that there are a variety of groups and such a opportunity each semester to step into something new. And I think even around this first conversation, it's like, boy, if we've been thinking about being a part of community and what that could do, but we don't make time for it, then I mean, it really is just kind of a great idea. So hopefully, if you haven't had a chance to, that you'll take that step this winter. There's online, there's in person, there's all sorts of different options, and everything I feel like in between of that mix. So we are really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I am super, super excited for this group semester to get started, and I know so many group leaders and all of you who are getting ready to join a group are looking forward to it as well. If you have questions about groups, you can get in touch with your campus pastor, with your Next Steps director at your campus. Really just ask anybody on the team. They'd love to help you out because it's all of our job. Our goal is to help every person get connected in groups, whether we're a kids director or a Next Steps director. So thank you guys so much for the conversation today. I'm really grateful for it. Again, just a reminder, we are in the midst of these 21 days of prayer and fasting. And so if you have not decided to join and start with us yet, this is a great time to do it. We're only a week in. It's never too late to join. Pick something to fast from. It could be a meal. It could be some sort of social media, something that you can stop and put aside and say, I'm going to put God intentionally first in this season at this start of the year, just to recenter our hearts and remind ourselves of our purpose and what we get to do here during this life. So guys, thanks again for the conversation today. I'm looking forward to Ben continuing it. I know we're a couple weeks away from this right now, but I just want to give a nod. I had a quick conversation with Nate today. I was in the office, and the preach off is coming up here in a couple weeks. So that's the one announcement for the weekend that I'll give. Super Bowl weekend, and somehow the Browns beat the Steelers this weekend. So I feel like I have to say that for all of my Browns fans out there. I don't know how they did it, but Marna, you watched the whole game, right?
I did not watch the game, but I have to tell you that this has probably been the thing that's giving me life, is just watching people so excited. I'm not personally but they're so excited, and the posts and the pictures and the stuff, and you're just I'm just really happy for them. They
You
needed
feel like
this.
finally.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ben, did you stay up all night watching the game too? I'm sure you were cheering on the Browns.
Yeah, I did. I watched most of it. I don't like the Browns, but I'm happy for all my friends who are Browns fans. Ohio State, we're taping this on Monday, so Ohio State plays tonight, and that's really the game I'm a little more interested in. But yeah, good for the Browns, and they got the Chiefs next week, and hopefully they can win. That'd be fun.
Anyway, football talk, probably irrelevant, but Super Bowl weekend's coming up, and it's a lot of fun for us. We do a preach off, and it's a really fun time just to think about who you could be inviting to come to church, watch church, because it's a unique experience that I don't think a lot of people have experienced in church before. So again, anyway, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us. I'm super grateful for you. Am I missing anything? Ben, your mic's on. Are you going to say something? Nope. Okay, I'm good. I got it all. Thank you guys so much for listening. You guys matter so much. I hope you were reminded of that today, and I hope this podcast was helpful in helping you be reminded that you matter. Have a great week. We'll see you later.